Iranian President Hassan Rouhani makes his first visit to Europe since the implementation of the nuclear deal. In Italy, mega deals worth up to 17 billion euros are announced. Islamic State publishes a new video purportedly showing images and final statements of 9 of the perpetrators of the November Paris attacks, which killed 130 people. And a few dozen people gather in Cairo's Tahrir Square to mark 5 years since millions of Egyptians took to the streets in a revolution that would eventually oust longtime strongman Hosni Mubarak. Good evening and welcome to the news today. You're joining us live from the Jaffa Port. Tehran is open for business. That was the message President Hassan Rouhani conveyed as he met with Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi today in Rome. His first trip to Europe since the lifting of sanctions against this country. Rouhani is also set to visit France, as Eli Hochenberg, diplomatic correspondent for the News Today, reports.
Landed in Rome, #constructive engagement. This is how Iranian President Hassan Rouhani launched his big Europe adventure, only a week after implementation day of the nuclear agreement and more than 15 years since an Iranian president last visited the Western continent. And there are many good reasons for Rouhani to break the mold and arrive in Europe, billions of them.
Sanctions are gone, but it is a long road from sanctions to developments. We have to work towards this path, and it is doable.
At the first stop in Rome, the Iranian president, accompanied by a delegation of no less than 120 strongmen, is expected to sign commercial agreements worth between 15 to 17 billion euros. Yet not only business is being discussed. On Tuesday, Rouhani will head to the Vatican to meet Pope Francis, but not before holding a session with Italian business leaders. After spending 2.5 days in Italy, the Iranian delegation will travel to Paris on Wednesday, and on Thursday he is due to be officially welcomed by French President François Hollande. Lunch, however, won't be served due to Iranian insistence not to dine where wine is served. According to reports, Rouhani is willing to finalize a large-scale deal with Airbus for the purchase of 114 aircrafts, a significant boost to Iranian aviation, one of the world's oldest aircraft fleets. Meetings with other French companies are also scheduled, such as Peugeot, in which Tehran is reportedly negotiating a 500 million euro deal. Europe was the largest trading partner of the Islamic Republic prior to sanctions being imposed, and since the nuclear deal was signed, unprecedented number of European business delegations have arrived in Tehran to re-trigger trade cooperation. But not only Europeans are seizing this new economic opportunity, as only on Saturday, Iran and China signed no less than 17 agreements on a wide range of issues, increasing bilateral trade to $600 billion over the next decade.
Yes, and joining me now in the studio are Iranian politics expert Meir Javedanfar. Good evening.
Good evening, Ayman. Good evening, Eli.
And diplomatic correspondent for the News Today, Eli Hochenberg. Good evening, Eli.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Well, Meir, Rouhani is arriving in Italy with 6 ministers, several businessmen. What can we expect from this luxurious Rouhani roadshow in Europe?
Well, it's very important for President Rouhani to show the people of Iran that he's going to deliver on the economy front. This is very important. We have the parliamentary elections coming up in Iran in February, 25th of February, and he has to stand for re-election in 2017. And already the hardliners are on his back. They're saying that, he's not living up to his other promises. He has not made the economy better. There's still problems in Iran. So it's very important for President Rouhani to show tangible results to the Iranian people from the nuclear deal. And one of the number one, he's doing it through deals with Western countries. Number two, he's doing it through deals which are mean investment in Iran. The Italians are going to open up a steel company in Iran. And, with the construction boom in China and elsewhere, there's a demand for steel. And number three, it's very important for him to show the Chinese and the Russians that there are other countries that Iran can counterbalance to their weight. As we know, the Chinese premier was in Tehran yesterday. They're going to do $600 billion of business within the next 10 years. So he wants to basically tell the Chinese and the Russians who had Iran's market during the sanctions to say, look, thank you for your friendship. We appreciate it. But we also want to bring a bit of competition when it comes to doing business with Iran.
Well, Mayor, let's talk about the Iranian delegation a little more in depth and join in from Skype, via Skype from Berlin in Germany, Arash Azizi, writer and journalist who is set to join the Iranian delegation in Paris on Wednesday. Good evening. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Good evening. It's great to be with you.
We're happy to have you. What can you tell us about the items that will rank high on the agenda for the Iranian delegation in Paris?
Look, there is basically the choice of Paris as the choice of France as a second European destination of this trip is very important. It shows that there will be a concerted effort on some fields. Now, most importantly, health industry and automaking industry. So prior to the sanctions, Peugeot and Renault, the two famous car companies of France, had a big presence in Iran, and there will be an attempt to bring them. Now, it needs to be emphasized, I think, as the previous guest said as well, that the Rouhani government tries very much to decenter the economy from China and Russia and try to increase the relations with Europe. Now, France and subsequently Germany, which I believe will be the next destination for Foreign Minister Zarif, are very important in that regard.
And Mr. Azizi, of course, Iran is headed for elections. How is President Rouhani's European trip being met in Iran?
I think, look, this is the first official trip by an Iranian president in a generation almost, 16 years. During the years of Ahmadinejad, people were, used to hear much pompous coverage of trips to countries like Comoros or small countries in Africa, which I mean, of course, are important in their own right, but were of little economic benefit to Iran. Now we have a major trip. There is already, before President Rouhani's plane had landed in Rome, something like 18 billion euros in investment deals with Italy were announced. Similar or higher numbers are expected for France and Germany. So there is a very positive look, it's a clear indication that few days after the implementation day and the beginning of the lifting of sanction, Iranian economy is opening to the West, to the world, and not only economy, but the sort of state as a whole. And I think they're being viewed in Iran very optimistically as signs that better days and more open days lie ahead.
And of course, ahead of these elections and after the sanctions have been lifted, let's take an in-depth look at what's going on in Iranian society today. Is there more hope than before, would you say?
In the Iranian society?
Yes.
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of hope. Let's be very clear on something. This president was elected in a situation where there wasn't a lot of hope, and he had a basic key promise. He said, I'm going to start a diplomacy with the West. I'm going to lift the sanctions, end the nuclear crisis, lift the sanctions, and begin a better economic time. The president seems to have made good on his first promise to lift the sanctions, get a nuclear deal with the West. That seemed impossible at the time. And this week we'll see the beginning of economic deals that seem to be the second part of his promise. He famously said that the centrifuges should work, but also should the country's economy, and he seemed to be making good on it. Of course, the only thing is that the economic consequences are not always very clear-cut. The problems of unemployment, other problems that exist in Iranian society will not be solved overnight, and there would be also a problem of basically any government will also need to do a work of managing expectations, basically.
Yes.
To make sure there's no disappointment.
Yes, he made good on his first promise, and we will continue discussing his further promises tonight. Arash Azizi joining us from Berlin. Thank you very much for that. Ellie, what can we make, speaking of promises, of the fact that one of the first potential deals for Iran is in the aviation sector, a hugely dramatic deal, 114 aircraft?
Yeah, well, it's not by mistake that Rouhani chooses to focus on the aviation field to begin with, because following what Mayor and Arash said, it is very important for Rouhani to show the Iranian people that the lifting of sanctions, the nuclear deal which is contested by hardliners even now, is beneficial for them. And for many years, since the Iranian Revolution in 1979, the aviation field in Iran has been suffering a whole lot because Iranians couldn't simply purchase any aircrafts or
spare parts for the jets they already own. So we see a very old, aging field within the Iranian economy, and this opportunity, following that, of course, Iranians have been suffering from many delays due to fixing the aging planes, etc., etc. So changing this field for the better will have an immediate ramifications on the Iranian people, and that will be a first signal to them that the Iranian economy is improving due to the sanctions lifting.
So we know what's in it for Iran. We've been discussing this a lot. What's in it for Italy?
Well, business. I think if we had relations with Iran and Rouhani was coming to Israel with $18 billion worth of business, I'm sure we'd be rolling out the red carpet for him.
For Khamenei too?
If once, we can all live in hope.
Let's not push it.
We can all live in hope. But the two issues is very important. Number one, the Iranian investors in Tehran Stock Exchange are very excited. Today, the Tehran Stock Exchange jumped by 1,100 points. That's the second highest jump since the implementation day, which when the stock exchange jumped 1,400 points. But another important issue is this. 60% of the candidates for the upcoming elections have been disqualified by the hardline Guardian Council. People expect Rouhani to go in there and to fight for them and to have them reinstated. There are some estimates that he'll get 15% of them reinstated, that's all. So that's likely to bring disappointment. So it's even more important for Rouhani to show economic results because he can't deliver the promises in other areas, which was to bring more plurality into Iran's economy, into Iran's politics, to allow the reformists to come back and run, to allow everybody, he called the Majlis the house of the people, Khane Millat, the house of the parliament of the people, but if he can't get the reformists in, the reformists are going to be angry at him because he supported them. So if he can't deliver politically, it's even more important for him to deliver economically, and this is where it's very important that he brings good news from Europe.
Yes, Eli Hochenberg and Meir Jabadanfar, thank you very much for joining me in this. There's a lot more to say. We will have you in this duo back again here with me to discuss. Now, next on our headlines, the Islamic State has published a video purporting to show images and final statements of 9 of the people who took part in the Paris terror attacks in November. In response, French President François Hollande vowed to continue striking the group and said that Paris would not be deterred by any threats. I-24 News defense correspondent Shai Ben-Ari reports.
The latest propaganda video released by the Islamic State group Sunday was designed as a tribute to the terrorists who carried out the attacks in Paris last November. The video featured statements from 9 of the men involved in the murder of 130 people. Most of these statements appear to have been filmed in IS-controlled territory before the attacks. The Paris ringleader, Abdelhamid Abaoud, however, appears inside a room, perhaps already on European soil.
Sachez que l'État islamique vous envoie des chasseurs soif de sang de mécréants, des chasseurs qui n'auront aucun répit pour vous égorger.
The video features similar threats throughout, as well as training exercises in preparation for the Paris attacks. Brutal executions of captives, which have become a gruesome staple of IS videos, are also seen. 2 of the 9 perpetrators have yet to be formally identified, but are shown in the video under the aliases Ukash al-Iraqi and Ali al-Iraqi, suggesting they are Iraqi natives. These are thought to be the 2 men who blew themselves up outside the Stade de France while carrying forged Syrian passports. The video also features supposed encrypted messages, though their authenticity has been called into question by no less than Edward Snowden. Towards the end, a threat is issued against British Prime Minister David Cameron.
We stand with you. United.
Cameron's office dismissed the video as another move by a group that is, quote, clearly in decline and retreat. The French president, who also features heavily in the video, reacted during an official visit to India.
And let me tell you here,
they are provoking us in the worst possible manner, but this can only make us more determined, including myself, to be more determined to take the right decision. The decision that I have taken and confirmed. We will be extremely determined to strike again and again against IS.
Meanwhile, the EU's police agency, Europol, has released a new report warning that IS is likely planning more terror across the continent, and France in particular. with intelligence suggesting the group has already established a command unit to direct such attacks.
Let's go now via Skype to London, where we're joined by Colonel Richard Camp, former commander of British forces in Afghanistan. Good evening, Colonel Camp. Thank you for being with us.
Good evening. My pleasure.
Colonel Camp, the new video that we just saw, it seems that it would indicate that the Paris attackers were not only influenced by the IS, as we so far presumed, but that they coordinated with the group from strongholds in Syria and Iraq. How would you say this would change the way France might cope with the threat?
Well, I think that it's pretty clear that the French government already were aware or had very strong suspicions that it was more than simply inspiration from the Islamic State that was driving these attacks. It was actually direct coordination, direction from Syria and Iraq, which is, of course, the principal reason why they commenced bombing against or intensified bombing campaigns against the Islamic State there, and which Britain joined in on. So I think this is not, for the authorities, I don't think this will be a great surprise. I think it does underline the increasing dangers that the Islamic State present, not just in the Middle East, but also across Europe.
And Colonel Camp, a statement that we saw today from the UK government called the video, quote, another desperate move from an appalling terrorist group that is clearly in decline. Is the UK government right in assessing that the IS is weakening? And does this video pose a threat to the UK government?
Well, I think it obviously is intended as part of a terror campaign. It's intended to intimidate people. And it's also intended to inspire people, because there are Muslims, there are many people among the Muslim communities in Europe to which this is in part addressed, who will be inspired, will be inclined to support the Islamic State because of this kind of propaganda. So clearly it's a weapon on their part. We would be foolish to ignore its message. We'd be foolish also to give too much credence to it, and I don't believe we should be frightened by it, but I don't believe at the same time that the Islamic State is in terminal decline. I think it's had damage done to it. It is suffering in certain areas, but in other areas it's on the increase, it's on the rise, and it still enjoys very, very widespread support around the Islamic world throughout not only the Middle East but the West.
Yes, Colonel Richard Camp joining us on the phone from London. Thank you very much for that. And here in the studio, I'm joined by senior Middle East analyst Ali Waqid. Good evening, Ali. Well, Ali, one of the people we saw in the video is the suspected ringleader of the Paris attack, Abdelhamid Abaoud. It seems fair to say that the French security officials didn't know he was this deeply involved with the IS in Syria and Iraq. Can we call this a security failure on the French authorities' part?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a security failure, and the security failure started when 1,700 French in the last 2 or 3 years passed from France to Iraq and Syria, always via Turkey, and the French intelligence did not identify that the youth that are passing from France to the Middle East have the same profile, are joining the same jihadist groups, and there the failure started. I think we cannot talk of an absolute failure, because some reports say that the French intelligence and other European and Western intelligence knew that there were this flew towards the Islamic State, but they preferred keeping those inspired jihadists fighting in the Middle East, thinking that they won't be back in their homelands, trying to import the ideology and the training, the military training they received in the Middle East, in Syria and in Iraq, to France and elsewhere in Europe. And here, I think, the peak of the failure.
Well, Ali, while this is going on in Syria, something else that's happening in the region is, of course, the potential peace talks. Let's give this update to our viewers and continue the conversation. A new round of peace talks to end the Syrian conflict will begin in Geneva on Friday after a delay over who will represent the country's fractious opposition. Negotiations had been scheduled to open today, but a stalemate over the makeup of the delegation had forced the date back. The so-called proximity talks are scheduled to last 6 months, with the first round lasting between 2 and 3 weeks. And Ali, to what extent is the opposition in Syria fragmented? And if so, Is there any hope at all for these talks?
It is so deeply fragmented. I mean, when we talk about the Syrian opposition, we should pay attention to a point. There is a Syrian opposition based in Turkey. There is a Syrian opposition sponsored by Saudi Arabia. There is a Syrian opposition inside Syria. And of course, the Russians had created their opposition, which some of the figures of the opposition will serve kind of advisors to the UN envoy that is leading these peace talks. We are talking about Friday. I am not sure that there won't be a surprise of the last minute that will delay once again the talks, because for the moment there is no full agreement between the Syrian regime and the UN envoy about the identity of the Syrian position. It seems that it will start on Friday. How much this will progress and will lead us to a peace process in Syria, I'm very much doubtful, because I think that the Syrian regime thinks that it has the momentum on the ground to keep its military campaign, and the two main actors within the opposition, the ISIS and the al-Nusra Front, are absent in these talks.
Well, one more place where there's no big surprises, Ali, is Egypt. Let's take a look at this story that sums up what happened 5 years after the revolution that ousted Hosni Mubarak. From I-24 News defense correspondent Shai Ben-Ari.
January 2011, hundreds of thousands of Egyptians poured onto the streets of Cairo. Their demand, the fall of Hosni Mubarak's authoritarian 30-year rule. After 18 days of protests and violence, Mubarak finally stepped down, a staggering result that seemed to herald a new era of democracy. But for young activists like Mustafa, the Egyptian regime is no less repressive today than it was 5 years ago.
We've been banned from appearing on any media for more than 2 years. The small space still available for us in newspapers may or may not stay. But it's my duty and responsibility to say everything I believe, whether the regime likes it or not. Because at the end of the day, we fought for democracy, and democracy has not been implemented yet.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Egypt's new strongman, has already warned against holding demonstrations on the 5th anniversary of the start of the revolution, boosting security across the country. And over the past few months, the government has closed down several cafes and cultural centres that were regular hangouts of activists.
It's all part of an aggressive campaign of arrests and closures of places associated with the revolution. Those places used to embody the culture of the revolution. These used to be the open playgrounds of writers, actors and artists who took part in the revolution from the beginning. Places like Townhouse and Rawabet or Merit, the publishing house, where they used to camp out at during the revolution.
After Mubarak's successor, Islamist Mohammed Morsi, was ousted by the army in 2013, the authorities carried out a brutal police crackdown on his supporters and other opponents. Hundreds were killed and thousands more arrested. But many Egyptians are tired of years of political unrest and economic stagnation and credit Sisi for at least bringing some form of stability.
Egyptians are angry and frustrated. Their living conditions are getting worse every day, and hope for the future has been shaken. No one knows what's in store for them tomorrow.
And what will happen on the anniversary of the revolution is also uncertain, with the iconic Tahrir Square, the epicenter of the 2011 uprising, now totally under control of the authorities.
Yes, joining myself and Ali Waked from Cairo now is Jacob Wirtschafter, I-24 News Cairo correspondent. Good evening, Jacob. Thank you for being with us.
Good evening, Ayman. It's nice to be with you.
It's good to have you. Jacob, we just took a look at the story about Egypt's situation 5 years after the ousting of Hosni Mubarak. And now with President al-Sisi supposedly cracking down of supporters of the Arab Spring ideals, what happened to the spirit of the movement that we saw in Tahrir Square? Is it in any way still alive?
I think my friends here in Cairo might say that the report that came up before you came to me, and in some ways your questions are more of an Al Jazeera way of looking at the question rather than how Egyptians are looking at it. There was a parliamentary election here 2 months ago, and there's a system in place for an institutionalized form of democracy in Egypt, and there are rules of the game, and those rules of the game don't include violent demonstrations, and they don't include terrorism. So the Muslim Brotherhood is out of this game. There were a few demonstrations in MB neighborhoods in Alexandria today. Cairo is quiet. The noise is inside Egypt's parliament, where there's a debate over the civil service law. And there are going to be arguments over how to restructure the economy and restructure local government and get Egypt back on track to get jobs in place here for 90 million Egyptians.
And yet, Jacob, despite this landmark of 5 years after the ousting of Hosni Mubarak, why were they, as you mentioned, very few people in Cairo today marking this occasion?
I think the reason it was indicated in your report is that the government made it clear that nobody should be on the street, okay? And the other reason is people are looking for security, they're looking for quiet, and they're looking for the government to start solving problems. They're not looking for a conflict. They're looking for some kind of consensus to deal with the issues facing Egypt.
Yes, Jacob Wirtschafter, thank you very much for that, joining us from Cairo. Ali, 5 years have passed. The Muslim Brotherhood was in power for 1 year. Now El-Sisi, with the military rule, is ruling Egypt. It begs the question, is a democracy even possible in Egypt?
No, if the government keep walking on the track it is following since almost 2 years, and the liberal and moderate Islamic opposition don't have any room to act in the Egyptian public sphere, plus the Egyptian media are adopting self-censorship and are totally supporting the regime with a huge lack of any kind of criticism vis-a-vis the regime. I think this is the cocktail that is bringing us to the bad period of former President Hosni Mubarak, in which there is no opposition, self-censorship on the media, and a huge and central place to the military in the Egyptian institutions. We know that the one who were elected in the parliament that Jake mentioned are most of them businessmen very close to the regime and to the former regime of President Hosni Mubarak. The military confirmed all the candidates and accepted and banned other candidates. And the fact that all the figures we saw in the eve of 2011 were absent because they were abroad, they were killed or in jail, in my opinion, sums what is the situation of Egypt today.
5 years on, and it seems like we're talking about the same Egypt. Ali Waked, thank you very much for being with me tonight. The News Today is off for a 2-minute break now, and we'll be back with much more, so stay tuned.